2026 Aston Martin Vantage Roadster First Drive, Open-Top Monster. The convertible version of Aston's heavily revised sports car only makes the driving experience more visceral. We've spent a lot of time in Aston Martin's heavily revised Vantage Coupe sports car. Beginning with our first drive opportunity a year ago in Spain and continuing with a fully instrumented test and a comparison showdown. Those latter two reports are coming very soon to MotorTrend.com. Now we've driven the 2026 Aston Martin Vantage Roadster, the convertible spin-off of the car that's impressed us mightily already. The only big question we had was, does removing the hard top from the super fun, twin-turbo, big power, rear-wheel drive tarmac scorcher make for a better or worse performance driving experience? Had it is. We won't go too far down the technical rabbit hole here. Our stories covering the Vantage Coupe First Drive and the 2026 Vantage Roadster First Look provide in-depth breakdowns concerning all the details about what makes this Vantage generation significantly new. What's massively important to know about the convertible is that the new Vantage Roadster, according to Aston Martin and confirmed by our seat of the pants feel, is uncompromised by its roof removal. The Roadster of course uses the same bonded and extruded aluminum chassis the company claims is about 5% stiffer compared to the previous AM6 Gen Vantage. Likewise for both Coupe and Vantage Roadster. Aston says the architectural upgrades make the cars twice as stiff as the previous Vantages at the suspension's 4 strut tops. Thank a new stiffer and lighter structural crossmember across the front end for a chunk of that. Along with revised bushings and improved cross-bracing between the front shock towers. Aston also says the rear multi-link suspension benefits from the stronger strut towers to the tune of a 29% stiffness increase during cornering. Judged by our experience with the coupe, this hardware package helps transform the Vantage into more of a serious sports car and less of a super sporty grand tourer than ever before. Vantage Roadster differences. Marek Reichman, Aston's Executive Vice President and Chief Creative Officer, and Simon Newton, Director of Vehicle Attributes and Performance, promised the 2026 Vantage Roadster exhibits no ill effects when driving it compared to the coupe. Their confidence comes thanks to the fact the two versions were engineered and designed simultaneously from the jump. This means Aston had zero need to add any structural elements to cope with something like increased chassis flex caused by eliminating the steel roof because, as they say, there is none. We think about two structures in one, from the beginning of the design process. Reichman said, we didn't need to do anything extra for the convertible. It's all done in terms of chassis stiffness and it being able to cope with taking away this big roof structure. You've got to do that beforehand. You make sure the chassis is inherently strong enough in the first place. A big, dynamic upshot of this is Aston's claim that the Vantage Roadster weighs just 132 pounds more than the hardtop. With all the additional heft coming from its Z-fold style fabric power folding roof. It's notably slim when stowed, taking up relatively little space, and doesn't look clunky and out of place when it's up. You can raise or lower it via a button on the center console or do so remotely via the key fob as long as you're within 7 feet of the car. Equally enticing, performance boss Newton told us. The Vantage's suspension required only slightly different settings for the topless model versus the setup we found so rewarding and fun to experience in the coupe. Aston made no changes to the actual mechanical spring or damper rates. But it did update the electronically controlled Bilstein DTX active damper programming within the shock absorber's range of variability to compensate for the Roadster's slightly different weight distribution versus the coupe's 50-50 front, rear for the hardtop compared to 49-51 for the convertible. We used a slightly bit more variable damping to prop up the rear. Newton said, because it's a little bit heavier car. We just sped up the rear axle, active damping, a bit to keep it feeling as agile as the coupe. The drive. How do you want it? By it, we mean do you prefer the coupe's flowing, crowd-stopping look? Or do you prioritize the nearly equally visually stunning Vantage Roadster's ability to let air and wind into the cabin? Along with letting you hear even more of the Mercedes-AMG supplied 4.0-liter twin-turbo V8's raging and snapping exhaust sounds? That's all it comes down to. Other than the Vantage Roadster's starting price premium, whatever it turns out to be, Aston hasn't finalized a Roadster price due to the US tariff situation over the already plenty expensive hardtop. driving the newest Vantage on a route that comprised freeways and plenty of challenging, twisting mountain roads spanning desert areas in and around Palm Springs to Idlewild, California, and back again. Keeping a cap on broad smiles became a futile exercise. Raising and lowering the roof and windows takes a scant 6 to 7 seconds. Ashton's official claim is 6.8 seconds, and is doable at speeds of up to 31 miles per hour. We began with the roof in place, interested in discovering how much noise the 8-layer panel permitted into the cockpit. It's easy enough to converse with your passenger in this circumstance, but there's a bit more wind effect generated where the side windows meet the roof. We didn't have a decibel meter on hand, so we can't say how much louder the experience is versus the coupe. But it's certainly livable enough and isn't something that had us wishing we were behind the conventional Vantage's wheel instead. Regardless, drop the overhead coverage, and you'll rarely, if ever, think about it again. This is naturally where the 2026 Aston Martin Vantage Roadster stakes its claim to being included on any enthusiast's fantasy garage list. And not simply because it's a beautiful car. You don't detect any old-time tells like cowl shake or rattles stemming from the lack of a permanent roof or any shoddy ancillary build quality. And if there are any dynamic differences between the Roadster and the coupe, suspension or otherwise, ride quality or handling, we're going to need to drive the two cars back-to-back on a racetrack and near they're far too high for the street dynamic limits to even begin to unearth such a performance delta. A potential mind changer. Just as with the standard Vantage, there's a lot of performance available to tap into. The convertible steering is just as direct and precise, if anything. We sometimes wished for a third setting for the steering's weight, as the two settings Aston provides skew a bit toward the heavy side. Slowing the Roadster won't cause you to stress whatsoever, thanks to big bite from the even bigger 6-piston caliper, 400mm front, 4-piston, 360mm rear standard brakes, or the even bigger optional carbon ceramic rotors that measure 410mm in front while remaining the same size as the standard units in back. Continuing with the size theme, the Vantage Roadster of course rides on the same borderline comically humongous tires as the coupe. 325/30ths 21-inch Michelin Pilot Sport S5s in back and 275/35ths S in front. When you stand behind the car and get a load of the tire's width, you can hardly help but laugh at the aggression it imparts visually. Traction therefore is rarely an issue. Not even when you smash the throttle at low speeds while applying some steering lock and simultaneously calling upon the V8's 656 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque. The latter numbers are good, Aston says, for slinging the Roadster from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.5 seconds. A mere 0.1 seconds slower than we've timed the same feat in the coupe, and an identical 202 mph top speed. You might not feel comfortable gunning for that top-end number in a topless car. Or even with a permanent top, for that matter, but the point is well taken. The Vantage Roadster is, as far as the driving experience goes, effectively a regular Vantage in the sharp, exhilarating, great handling, nice riding, and outright fast ways it performs. You just get the bonus of being able to put the top down while doing so. If the coupe is a legit rival now to cars like Porsche's 911 Carreras, you'll read more about this topic in our upcoming comparison test. The Roadster is equally in the game versus the German manufacturer's cabriolet models. The Vantage is such a driver's car. In fact, that experiencing all the sensations it offers and finding them amplified further with its top lowered made this author, generally a coupe devotee and not a convertible guy, thinking this might very well be the way to go when it comes to this particular model from the Gaydon UK factory. Pay up. For convertible sports car fans with sizable bank accounts, this car is on the list of no-brainers. As mentioned, the company hasn't yet settled on a price thanks to the US tariff situation. So we'll estimate a starting price of about $220 and be pleasantly surprised if it turns out to be less than that. Taking price out of the equation for a moment, as much as that may or may not make sense in this realm, the 2026 Aston Martin Vantage Roadster is, like its sibling, a worthy alternative to its relevant Porsche competition. It's also more compelling, at least for serious driving enthusiasts. than something like the equivalent non-hybrid Mercedes-AMG SL63 that shares a lesser performing version of the same V8 under its hood. But since dollars matter, even for many of the rich among us, it's up to potential customers. The car is on sale now. Whether the new Vantage Roadster is worth the cost of admission over the more ubiquitous competition in this space. For our money, imaginary as it is, and, fun fact, 20 years after the first V8-powered Vantage hit the market, the answer is a resounding yes.